Thank you very much, Mike, and Dr. Maxwell, thanks for letting me come here tonight. Appreciate that. I do have a couple of friends in the audience that I want to recognize. One of my mentors and former boss, Dr. Rex Ellis, is in the house with us tonight, so give him a round of applause. And my very good friend, Superintendent Terry Brown, who is our superintendent of the National Memorial over there at Fort Monroe. Let's give him a round. If I was to construct a graph of the pursuit of Africans and African Americans in pursuit of their equality and their freedom, it would have sharp peaks and some very deep valleys. And what I want to do tonight is to unpack that for you a little bit by using the Arc of Freedom. The date line I'm going to talk about is Hampton Roads, Virginia. Archaeologists tell us that thousands and thousands of years ago, the natives of this land established a community here at Point Comfort and through Newport News in Hampton, Virginia. They were hunters and gatherers, and we also learned that they had learned to cultivate the soil. Literally on the eve of the arrival of the first English here, they had already established a great community under the great chief Obi-Wan Kanu. Most of us know him as Powhatan, the great Powhatan nation. And they pretty much coexisted as a community, a large community here in the Hampton Roads area. In 1607, the first English-speaking colonists arrived. And where they did coexist with the Virginia Indians, I would say that relationship was somewhat fragile. In 1619, the Secretary of the Colony, Mr. John Rolfe, husband of Pocahontas, the Secretary of the Colony recorded this, that arrived at Point Comfort 20 and odd Negroes, and they were traded for goods at Point Comfort. You see the merging and collision of those three cultures has affected every one of us in this room tonight, whether that's in music, or food, or art, or the way we think about customs and traditions and manners. You see these three cultures, the Virginia Indians, the Africans, and the English, all influenced one another. So tonight, I want to talk about those 20 and odd and explore this through the Arc of Freedom. 1619, there's been a lot of discussion lately in the news, a lot of debate on whether or not those 20 and odd became indentured servants or were they enslaved. And while I think that's an important part of the narrative, I think this is more important to note. Because here's the situation. When they took and got off that boat, they were immediately segregated and discriminated against. That's the lesson we need to learn about 1619. And we're celebrating the 400 commemoration, not celebration, of that event this weekend. The very fact that they'd be treated as a commodity and traded for goods automatically separated them from the rest of the white colonists there in Virginia. And I don't think we should forget that. Because it's there it starts that we start to look at enslaving these Africans. And let's make no mistake, they were enslaved. They were enslaved when they were captured in Angola. They were enslaved when they were put in chains and put in the belly of that ship for that perilous journey across the Atlantic Ocean. They certainly were enslaved when they hit the beach and were traded for goods like chattel. Yes, they were enslaved. And where oral history tells us some of them may have been indentured, well, that's indentured without a contract. And that's a whole different ball of wax. So you see, it starts that way, and it will continue. And 60 years later, two very tragic things occur, it seems to me. The Virginia Indians had been taken off their land and pushed out. And they had made laws, codes, that if you were African, if you were dark, if your skin color was different, you are now enslaved. And that will continue for a long, long time. Even the Constitution of the United States only counted those Africans that were enslaved as 3/5 of a person. 3/5 of a person. By the time we get to the American Civil War, there have been many laws put out for the people to obey that dealt with slavery, dealt with the returning of slaves. And three important things happened in 1861. And I think it bears telling here tonight. The first thing that happened is that the Commonwealth of Virginia was on the fence of what to do about the American Civil War. Should they stay with the United States? Should they join the Confederate States of America? They were in a quandary. And the General Assembly met, and they debated, and they discussed, and they came to the conclusion that yes, we will stay under the protection of the United States Constitution. Down in Charleston, South Carolina, the first firing on a federal fort from the Confederates, Fort Sumter, will change that equation. Abraham Lincoln will call for troops, including the Commonwealth of Virginia, and this time, when the General Assembly convenes, they do decide to join the Confederate States of America. That's the first thing that happened in 1861. The second thing, a new general had come to Fort Monroe. Major General Benjamin Butler, a Democrat, appointed by a Republican president to be the overall commander of the largest stone fort in the country then, and it's the largest stone country in the country today. The third thing that happens is that three brave enslaved individuals over at Sewell's Point, where we see the aircraft carriers parked today, stole a boat. And they braved the Chesapeake Bay, and they went and rowed over to Fort Monroe to turn themselves in and to seek refuge and to escape the change and the labor of their masters. And they were welcomed in. The very next day, Major General Benjamin Butler interviewed them. He was a lawyer. He said, "Gentlemen, I understand you've escaped from your masters, from your owners. Why are you running away?" And they had a very compelling story. You see, their master had plantations further in the south, and he was going to relocate the enslaved population on his plantation. They didn't want to leave Virginia. They didn't want to leave Hampton. They didn't want to leave their home. They didn't want to be necessarily separated from their family. And so they took the chance to emancipate themselves. General Butler said, "Well, is the Confederate Army using you for anything?" "Yes, sir, they are. They're making us dig ditches. They're helping us. They're using us as labor for the Confederate Army." General Butler kind of took that under consideration. That very afternoon, a young officer by the name of Major Carey had been sent by his commanding officer, Colonel Mallory, said, "We're here to have you return to us these three enslaved individuals, Mallory, Baker, and Townsend. And by law, you have to. The fugitive slave law says that any runaway slave must be rightfully returned to their owner." General Butler said, "Well, that's exactly right. But it's my understanding that you're not part of the United States anymore, and that's a United States law, and if you want to have your slaves back under the fugitive slave law, well, swear allegiance to the United States and you can have them right back. Well, they didn't do that, did they? He said, not only that, but I understand you're using these enslaved individuals as labor against the United States Army, and I can tell you, if it was weapons, or if it was ammunition, or even if it was horse flesh, we would seize that as contraband of war. Now you say their property, I don't say that. But you, Major Carey, claim their property, and I'm going to seize them as contraband of war. So why is that important today? Well, the contraband decision made right over there at Fort Monroe by Major General Benjamin Butler set the stage for Abraham Lincoln, 16th President of the United States, and his cabinet to start to consider maybe the dynamics of the war has just changed. Yes, the beginning of the war may have been about restoring the Union and forcing the Confederates back into the fold, but now this war is a lot more important. This is about the emancipation and the end of slavery in the United States. And the contraband decision will start that ball rolling. The next thing that follows is the Emancipation Proclamation. The next thing after that, by the end of the war, 1865, we'll have the 13th Amendment. 3 men stole a boat, rowed across the Chesapeake Bay, risked turning themselves into federal authorities. And by the end of the war, 4 years later, 10,000 slaves will have run away and seek freedom and refuge in Fort Monroe. It truly is freedom's fortress. And it was a pleasure and a privilege for me to be here in this great space and with this great congregation and with you folks, and I thank you very much.